You know, sometimes I find myself laughing at the absurdity of it all. A shattered man standing in the wreckage of what he believed would endure eternally. And yet, I discover the capacity to grin at the cruel irony of existence. They assumed I'd collapse and remain there. They assumed the burden of treachery, the daggers in my spine, the mute evenings, and the infinite tears would consume me. But here I exist, communicating, hemorrhaging, weeping, and somehow still functioning. And that in itself is extraordinary. I never requested this conflict. I never pleaded for wounds that devour through my chest when I recall every statement communicated to me in confidence, every commitment constructed and demolished, every hand I grasped that later thrust me into the filth. But perhaps this is the destiny of a combatant, never selected, only manufactured. Suffering didn't request my authorization before it constructed its dwelling inside my skeleton. Darkness didn't knock before it demolished my barriers and established itself in my consciousness. And yet, despite everything, I exist. Not because I don't sense the flames, but because I have acquired how to ignite with it. Do you comprehend what it signifies to observe everything you cherish slip through your fingers, to combat until your knuckles hemorrhage, only to realize nobody was combating beside you? That's the variety of silence that doesn't simply occupy a space, it consumes your spirit. I screamed once, wept until the earth itself should have fractured open, but the world remained mute. That's when I comprehended. Nobody's arriving to rescue me. Nobody. And that reality severed deeper than any sword. It instructed me the variety of isolation that even death envies. But listen to me now. If you're hemorrhaging, if you're demolished, if you assume you can't extract one more step, comprehend this. Your suffering is the evidence of your capacity. Powerless men don't acquire tested like this. The flames don't invest itself on fragile timber. It selects iron. It selects those who can absorb the heat and still position. I am not proud of my tears, but I'm not ashamed of them either. Every drop that descended carved my face into the shape of a survivor. Every time they mocked me, I sharpened my silence until it evolved into a blade they can't escape. Sometimes I whisper to myself, why me? Why was I selected for this endless grief? And the answer arrives back louder than thunder, because you can carry it. That's the curse and blessing of the combatant. You don't select the suffering, but you master it until it bows before you. You advance with your chest torn open, yet nobody dares question if your heart is still beating. They comprehend. It is because they can sense it shake the ground beneath your steps. They desired me to fracture. How they desired to witness me crawl, pleading for mercy, suffocated by my own sorrow. And yes, I fractured. I fractured 1,000 times, but each fracture was a tsu lesson. Each scar was a scripture. Each treachery was an instructor whispering in my ear, you are more lethal when you ascend. And so I ascended again and again. Fractured, yes, but destroyed, never. So weep if you must, scream if the silence is choking you, but never ever surrender. Remember that every night concludes, no matter how endless it seems, and every combatant who hemorrhages in the dark will one day witness the dawn. And when that dawn arrives, when you advance out of the shadows, the world will finally comprehend why you kept proceeding. Because you were not combating for them. You were combating for yourself despite everything. I exist. And if I exist, then so can you. You witness these hands. They shake not from fear, but from carrying too much burden for too long. They've grasped weapons, grasped individuals I cherished, grasped my own face when the tears wouldn't cease. And sometimes they grasped nothing, just the emptiness of an existence I didn't request. Individuals examine me, and they assume capacity is this shiny armor, uncracked, untouched, indestructible. Fools. Genuine capacity is the man who wears fractured armor, dented and rusted, and still steps into the battlefield. Genuine capacity is the combatant who has no shield, only scars, and yet raises his chest to the storm like it owes him something. I don't conceal my suffering anymore. Why should I? Suffering has been my most dedicated companion. It never abandoned me. It never betrayed me. It wakes me up at night. It advances with me in the day. It consumes with me. It positions in silence beside me when everyone else departs. Suffering is the only companion who doesn't deceive. It communicates you exactly where you are powerless. It whispers what you must confront. It exhibits you the reality nobody else dares to state. And you comprehend what? It forces you to develop. Without it, I'd still be a gentle boy, assuming the world was generous. But now I witness it. This world is flames, and you either ignite or acquire to carry the flames. They laughed at me once. Do you comprehend what it seems like to pour your heart out? To provide everything and still be treated like a joke? They mocked my silence. They mocked my tears. They mocked my dedication. They assumed generosity meant vulnerability. But that's where they were incorrect. Generosity is not vulnerability. It is control. It is selecting not to evolve into the monster that created your scars. It is selecting not to destroy everything even though destruction would be simple. But here's the secret. When the combatant ceases holding back, when the combatant finally decides to cease explaining, cease forgiving, cease hemorrhaging for those who never invested emotion, he becomes unstoppable. I comprehend you're exhausted. I comprehend you're positioned there, questioning if the combat is worth it. You assume the world doesn't witness you. You assume your sacrifices are invisible. You weep at night, requesting God why your heart seems so heavy, why you carry storms nobody else can even imagine. I've requested the same questions, and the answer is harsh but simple. You were selected for this burden because you were constructed to carry it. Powerless men acquire excuses. Formidable men acquire battles. That's how it exists. That's how it will always exist. Despite everything, I exist. Not exist like grinning in the sunlight. Not exist like everything is simple. I exist because I acquired how to hemorrhage without perishing. I acquired how to advance with fractured bones and still keep advancing forward. I exist because I no longer anticipate the world to be gentle with me. I exist because I ceased pleading for dedication from the disloyal and affection from the unloving. I exist because I comprehended that my value does not decrease because they fail to witness it. Sometimes I whisper to myself when the night is too heavy, you will construct it even if nobody believes you. And every time I state it, something inside me positions taller. Something inside me refuses to fracture. That's what it signifies to be a combatant. You combat battles nobody witnesses. You weep tears nobody hears. And you still ascend like nothing occurred. And the more they thrust you into the ground, the deeper your roots develop. They buried me alive, but they forgot I was a seed. And to you, the one listening, weep, but don't collapse. Fracture, but don't surrender. Suffer, but don't silence your flames. Permit your scars to communicate louder than their statements. Permit your silence to evolve into their punishment. And when they arrive back, and they always arrive back, position tall, examine them in the eyes, and permit them to choke on the man you evolved into. Despite everything, I exist, and tomorrow, I'll be more than exist. I'll be unshakable. I recall the first time I fractured down, the first time my knees provided out under the burden of everything I carried. I assumed if I just screamed loud sufficiently, someone would hear me. But the room was empty. The world was deceased. And I realized something that night. Nobody is arriving. That reality contacted harder than any blade. It demolished every illusion I possessed about individuals, about affection, about dedication. I possessed to stitch myself back together with trembling hands. And every stitch was a lesson composed in blood. That's when I ceased anticipating comfort from others and commenced carving capacity out of my own misery. That's when the combatant inside me was born. Individuals always request, "How do you keep proceeding?" And I laugh, not because it's amusing, but because they'll never comprehend. They witness me positioned here and assume I'm untouched. They assume survival signifies I didn't suffer, but they don't witness the nights I drowned in silence, the mornings I woke up with eyes swollen from tears, the days I forced myself to keep advancing when my body screamed to collapse. That's what survival genuinely exists, dragging yourself through flames while nobody notices the flames. Despite everything, I exist, but exist doesn't signify happy. It signifies I've constructed peace with suffering. I've shaken hands with suffering. I've acquired to rest beside grief without permitting it to destroy me. It signifies when treachery knocked on my barrier, I welcomed it in, positioned it at my table, and stated, "Instruct me what I require to comprehend." And it executed. It instructed me that not everyone who swears dedication signifies it. It instructed me that individuals will grin at you while sharpening the blade behind their back. It instructed me that affection without respect is poison, and confidence without proof is suicide. But here's the thing, I required all of it. Every scar on my body is proof that I've existed through storms they wouldn't endure a day in. Every tear I've shed is a reminder that I can still sense even when my heart has been beaten into granite. Every time I was abandoned behind, every time I was mocked, every time I was doubted, it was all fuel. The flames didn't consume me, it constructed me. And now, I ignite from within. Let me communicate you something harsh. Individuals will not invest emotion until you win. They won't clap for your battles. They won't comfort you in your suffering. They won't believe in you when you're on your knees. But the day you ascend, the day you silence the volume with your success, the day you advance with the calm of a man who has endured torment, they will pretend they always comprehended you'd construct it. That's the nature of this world. And you can weep about it, or you can accept it and keep constructing yourself in silence. I selected the latter. There were nights I desired to conclude it all, nights where the thought of one more breath seemed heavier than mountains. But then I recalled my suffering is not a curse, it is a calling. If I provide up, then everything I've suffered becomes meaningless. But if I ascend, if I endure, if I advance through this torment and arrive out the other side, then every scar becomes a narrative. Every tear becomes a testimony. Every treachery becomes proof that I was more formidable than what attempted to fracture me. They don't comprehend. They assume I'm mute because I'm powerless. They assume my silence signifies surrender. but silence is the loudest weapon I've ever grasped. When I cease explaining, when I cease pleading, when I cease reacting, the world shakes. My silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. And when the time arrives, I will not require to raise my voice. The burden of who I've evolved into will communicate louder than any statements. To the one who seems like fracturing, don't. To the one who seems invisible, your time will arrive. To the one who has been betrayed, permit your scars to harden you, not poison you. Weep, scream, hemorrhage, but keep advancing. Because one day, when you position at the summit, when you examine down at everything you endured, you will finally comprehend why it possessed to damage this much. You will whisper to yourself, despite everything, I exist. And that will be the sweetest victory of all. You comprehend what the cruelest aspect exists. It's not the suffering itself. It's the silence that follows it. The silence of individuals you once carried on your back, who disappeared the instant you stumble. The silence of those who swore, I'll never depart yet, vanished when the storm arrived. That silence is louder than screams. It consumes through your chest like acid. It constructs you question your value, constructs you question if all your sacrifices signified nothing. And perhaps they executed to them, but not to me. Every sacrifice I constructed carved me into something they will never comprehend. Amusing, isn't it? They assumed abandoning me would destroy me. They assumed treachery would destroy me. They assumed rejection would silence me, but it only forged me. Sharper, harder, colder. It transformed me into something I never assumed I'd exist. Indestructible, not because I don't damage anymore. I damage every day. But I have acquired how to exist with wounds that never close. I've acquired how to combat with fractured ribs, how to position with demolished legs, how to grin with a hemorrhaging mouth. That's capacity. Not perfection, not comfort, not a simple road. Capacity is dragging yourself through the mud while they laugh and exhibiting up the next day anyway. Despite everything, I exist. Do you comprehend why? Because suffering ceased being my enemy. It evolved into my ally. Every scar on my body is a weapon now. Every tear I shed waters the soil beneath me, developing roots so deep they can't extract me out. Every time they doubted me, I carved those statements into granite and constructed a fortress out of them. I don't execute from my suffering anymore. I wear it like armor. There were days I desired to disappear, days where the thought of being forgotten seemed simpler than carrying on. I prayed for the night to consume me, for the earth to bury me, for the storm to drown me. But then I realized if I provide in, then everything I've endured becomes squandered suffering. My suffering would be for nothing, and I couldn't permit that. If I must damage, then my damage must construct something greater. If I must hemorrhage, then my blood must water something worth existing for. That is what kept me positioned. That is what kept me inhaling when my chest pleaded me to cease. Do you comprehend what genuine isolation exists? It's not positioned alone in a room. It's positioned in a room occupied of individuals, and realizing not one of them genuinely comprehends your battles. It's advancing through existence, surrounded by voices that never comprehend the screams inside your head. That isolation, it either destroys you or it shapes you into something untouchable. For me, it executed both. It destroyed the boy I was, and it provided birth to the combatant I evolved into. They communicated me I was too gentle. They mocked my tears. They stated, genuine men don't weep. Fools, do you assume tears construct me powerless? My tears are proof that I've carried mountains on my shoulders without losing my humanity. My tears are proof that I sense deeply, even when existence tears me apart. Powerless men conceal behind fabricated grins and hollow hearts. Formidable men weep, then wipe their face, extract up their sword, and keep combating. That's what I exist. That's what I've evolved into. So when you witness me mute, don't error it for defeat. When you witness me hemorrhaging, don't error it for vulnerability. When you witness me weeping, don't error it for surrender. Comprehend this. Everything I endure only adds to the storm I'm becoming. And one day, when the time is correct, that storm will fracture loose, and every individual who doubted me, every individual who betrayed me, every individual who laughed at me, they will recall my silence louder than any roar. Despite everything, I exist. Fractured, hemorrhaging, scarred, but exist. Exist because I refuse to surrender. Exist because I transformed my misery into fuel. Exist because I've accepted that this path is mine. And I will advance it with flames in my chest and tears in my eyes if I must. Exist because I comprehend that one day when I position at the summit, they will realize that the man they buried is the same man who acquired to develop roots in the dark. Let me communicate you what fractures a man. It's not the swords, not the fists, not even the endless nights without rest. What fractures a man is providing everything, offering his heart, his dedication, his blood, and still being treated like he is disposable. That's the cruelty that no blade can match. You combat with everything inside you, only to realize they never valued you, never witnessed the depth of your sacrifice. And in that instant, something inside you perishes. But here's the thing. They assumed that death was the conclusion of me. They assumed once I collapsed, I would never ascend again. But they were incorrect. That death was only the funeral of the powerless version of myself. From his grave ascended someone else. Someone darker, more formidable, untouchable. Despite everything, I exist, not the variety of exist individuals post about with fabricated grins and hollow statements. My exist is different. My exist signifies I've accepted the scars. My exist signifies I've constructed peace with the treachery. My exist signifies I've acquired how to advance with wounds that still hemorrhage. Because genuine combatants don't anticipate for healing, they combat while they are hemorrhaging. And every drop of blood that descends becomes a testimony that nothing could seize me. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, questioning if I mattered to anyone. Nights where silence pressed against my chest until I assumed I would suffocate. Nights where I desired to vanish, to permit the earth to consume me. But every time I arrived close to providing up, something whispered back, "Not yet. You still possess battles abandoned." And so I kept inhaling, sometimes with tears executing down my face, sometimes with fists clenched, sometimes barely hanging on. But I kept inhaling. Individuals don't realize how much capacity it extracts to simply keep existing when your spirit is exhausted. They assume survival is simple. They examine me and state, "You're formidable. You'll exist." If only they comprehended capacity isn't some gift you wake up with. It's forged by weeping until your eyes ignite, by descending and forcing yourself to crawl forward, by losing everyone you assumed you required and still acquiring to position. That's what capacity genuinely exists, enduring the nights that attempted to destroy you. Despite everything, I exist because now I comprehend. Suffering was never my enemy. Suffering was my instructor. Treachery was my test. Isolation was my training ground. Every scar, every wound, every heartbreak, it was all shaping me into something greater, something even I didn't believe I could evolve into. And the amusing thing exists. The very individuals who caused my suffering will one day fear the capacity it created. Let me communicate you a secret. Your enemies don't desire you destroyed, not genuinely. They desire you fractured, silent, forgotten. They desire your narrative to conclude in the middle. But the greatest vengeance you can provide them is to keep proceeding, to outlive their doubts, to ascend higher than they ever imagined you could, to grin at them one day, not with hatred, but with calm, unshakable silence, the silence that states, "You failed to bury me." That silence severs deeper than any blade. I used to assume tears constructed me powerless. I used to conceal them, ashamed of my own humanity. But now I witness differently. Tears don't construct me powerless. They prove I possess a heart formidable sufficiently to keep beating even after it's been torn apart. Tears prove I still invest emotion even when the world has provided me every justification not to. And that to me is capacity beyond measure. Powerless men conceal behind masks. Formidable men weep, then wipe their faces and return to the battlefield. That's who I exist. Sometimes I sing to myself, not to forget the suffering, but to remind myself that I still possess a voice. Despite everything, I am still alive. Despite everything, I am still here. And if you're listening, if you sense like you can't proceed on, permit me communicate you this. You can. You will. Because inside you, there exists a flames that refuses to perish. Yes, you will weep. Yes, you will fracture. Yes, you will sense abandoned. But every time you ascend again, you prove them incorrect. Every time you extract another step, you spit in the face of the darkness that attempted to drown you. And one day, when you examine back at everything you endured, you will realize you weren't just enduring, you were being constructed. Despite everything, I exist. Fractured, yes. Demolished, yes. But still here, still positioned, still inhaling, still ascending. And that is sufficient. I carry shadows inside me that no illumination can erase. I advance with phantoms, faces of individuals who swore they cherished me, voices that once committed forever, recollections that now sever like daggers. Do you comprehend what it's like to replay conversations in your head at night, attempting to locate the instant where everything proceeded incorrect? Do you comprehend what it's like to blame yourself for their treachery, to question if perhaps you weren't sufficient? That's the torment I exist with. That's the burden on my chest every morning. And yet, despite it all, I ascend. Not because I desire to, but because I must. Because if I permit it to destroy me, then their treachery wins. They assumed fracturing me would silence me. They assumed advancing away would erase me. But all it executed was create a man they can never reach again. I am no longer who I was. The boy who placed confidence too much. The man who provided without limits. The combatant who pleaded for dedication. That version of me perished in the flames, and in his remains positioned someone colder, harder, sharper. I don't explain myself anymore. I don't plead anymore. I don't pursue anymore. I have evolved into silence, and silence terrifies them more than my screams ever could. Despite everything, I exist. Not because existence acquired simpler, it acquired worse. The battles developed heavier. The nights developed longer. The isolation excavated deeper. But I evolved into more formidable. Suffering evolved into fuel. Treachery evolved into wisdom. Scars evolved into armor. That's what they don't comprehend. You cannot destroy a man who has acquired to construct castles from the rubble you abandoned him in. There were nights I assumed my chest would split open from the grief inside me. Nights where I wept until my body shook, where I whispered prayers with trembling lips, pleading for relief. Nights where I sensed the burden of the world pressing me into the floor, daring me to remain down. But every morning, even with swollen eyes and a fractured heart, I positioned, because a combatant doesn't acquire the luxury of surrender. A combatant combats, even when the combat is only to extract one more breath. Individuals examine me, and they witness survival. But they don't witness the cost. They don't witness how every grin is stitched together with suffering. They don't witness how every step is carried by willpower alone. They don't witness the hemorrhaging wounds under the armor. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps they were never meant to witness it. Perhaps my battle was always meant to be mine alone. And so I carry it quietly until silence itself becomes my conflict cry. I desire you to comprehend something. Being exist doesn't signify being happy. It doesn't signify being healed. It doesn't signify the suffering is eliminated. Being exist signifies I've accepted it. I've constructed peace with the fact that existence will not be gentle with me. It signifies I no longer execute from the flames. I advance through it. It signifies I no longer anticipate for rescue. I rescue myself. It signifies I no longer plead for affection. I evolve into it. That's what exist signifies when communicated by a combatant. And the beauty of it all, the same individuals who abandoned me in the dark will one day question how I constructed illumination out of nothing. They will question how I kept advancing when they swore I'd never ascend again. They will choke on the silence I provided them, because nothing destroys the guilty, like observing the man they buried ascend higher than they ever dreamed. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I still combat. So listen carefully. You who are fractured, you who are weeping, you who sense invisible, don't provide up. Your suffering possesses a purpose. Your scars are not decorations of defeat. They are proof of survival. Your tears are not vulnerability. They are proof that your heart still beats, even under flames. Permit them laugh. Permit them betray. Permit them doubt. None of it matters. What matters is that you keep positioned, because every day you ascend, you prove them incorrect. Every breath you extract is a victory. Every step you extract is defiance. And one day, when you position on the mountain of everything you endured, you will whisper the same statements I whisper now. Despite everything, I exist, and that will be sufficient. They don't witness the nights. They don't witness the instants where I stare into the dark and question if I am just a shadow passing through this world, unnoticed, unseen. They don't witness the hours I spend wrestling with my own consciousness, with recollections that don't fade, with voices that don't mute. They assume the combatant never fractures, but I fractured again and again. My bones didn't snap, but my spirit executed. My confidence executed. My heart executed. Yet, each time I demolished, I gathered the fragments with hemorrhaging hands, pressed them back into my chest, and whispered to myself, "Not today. You will not perish today." And I ascended. Fractured, yes, but ascending nonetheless. Do you comprehend what irony exists? It's when the same individuals who abandoned you in the flames later request, how you endured it. They observe you advance calm, composed, silent, and they question why you don't communicate to them anymore. They question why your eyes are colder, why your statements are sharper, why your silence ignites them more than your screams ever executed. And the answer is simple. I acquired what they were. I acquired what I was. I acquired what the world exists. And once a man acquires, genuinely acquires, he cannot proceed back to who he was before. Despite everything, I exist. But don't error me. Exist doesn't signify healed. Exist doesn't signify I don't ache when I recall. Exist doesn't signify I don't wake up some mornings with my chest heavy sufficiently to demolish me. Exist signifies I no longer plead for the suffering to cease. Exist signifies I've accepted that the suffering is a fragment of me now, stitched into my spirit, carved into my identity. Exist signifies I've acquired to combat while carrying it, to advance while hemorrhaging, to grin while weeping. That is my exist. There were nights I assumed nobody would ever comprehend, and perhaps that's genuine. Perhaps nobody ever will. But I ceased anticipating for comprehension. I ceased craving someone to examine me in the eyes and state, I witness you, I hear you, I comprehend what you're proceeding through. Because the reality exists, nobody will, not fully. Each man combats his conflict alone. Each combatant hemorrhages alone. And if you are anticipating for someone to rescue you from it, you will perish anticipating. That's the lesson I acquired in the dark. Your salvation must arrive from within. I examine back now at the boy I was, and I almost pity him. So naive, so trusting, so desperate to provide his heart away, desperate to please, desperate to be cherished. He assumed dedication signified something to everyone. He assumed generosity would always be returned. He assumed affection was sufficient to grasp individuals together. Poor boy. He didn't comprehend that dedication is rare. Generosity is often extracted as vulnerability, and affection without respect and consistency is nothing but poison. That boy perished, and in his place positions me, the combatant, scarred and unyielding. Sometimes, though, I miss him. I miss the gentleness, the innocence, the blind faith in individuals. But then I recall how they tore him apart, how they mocked him, how they abandoned him, hemorrhaging. And I whispered to myself, better to be hard and positioned than gentle and fractured. And I keep advancing despite everything. I exist. I communicate myself this, not because I believe it fully, but because I must. Because if I don't, the darkness will win, and I refuse to permit it. My suffering will not be squandered. My scars will not be for nothing. My silence will not be meaningless. If I must carry this burden, then it will forge me into something greater, something untouchable. And when the day arrives, when I finally position at the summit of the mountain, constructed from my suffering, I will examine down at the ruins of everything that attempted to destroy me and whisper, despite everything, I exist. To anyone listening, recall this. They can betray you. They can abandon you. They can laugh at your tears. But they cannot erase you unless you permit them. They cannot bury you unless you lie down in the grave yourself. And if you refuse, if you keep inhaling, keep advancing, keep ascending, then one day you will position as I position now, not healed, not unscarred, but alive, indestructible in spirit, untouchable in will, and that is worth more than any affection they failed to provide. Despite everything, I exist, and I always will. The nights are the hardest. That's when the burden arrives back, heavier than ever, pressing against my chest, daring me to collapse. During the day, I can wear the mask, calm, collected, unshaken. But when the darkness descends and silence settles, the mask fractures. That's when the recollections march in like soldiers, one after another, each carrying a fragment of my past I wish I could ignite. Faces of those who abandoned, voices of those who deceived, shadows of instants I can't erase. I lie there staring at the ceiling, and I request myself the same question over and over. Why me? Why this battle? Why this suffering? And the only answer I ever locate is silence. But silence communicates louder than statements, doesn't it? Silence instructed me that not every question possesses an answer. Silence instructed me that existence owes me nothing. Silence instructed me that the combatant does not acquire to select his battles. He only acquires to select whether or not he keeps combating. And I selected to combat, not because I don't desire to fracture. I already executed. Not because I'm not exhausted. I am exhausted. I selected to combat because I refuse to permit the darkness to win. Because if I surrender, then all the suffering I carried would signify nothing. Despite everything, I exist. Not because I escaped suffering, but because I constructed it my ally. I permitted it to carve me, shape me, ignite me. I permitted it to destroy the powerless fragments of me and abandon behind only the iron. Do you comprehend what it seems like to cease fearing the flames and commence advancing through it willingly? It's terrifying at first. Every step seems like suicide. But then slowly you realize something. The flames cannot destroy what was born to endure it. And then you advance taller. You inhale deeper. You commence to grin when the flames lick your skin, because you comprehend you are no longer the victim. You are the survivor. There were days I pleaded for someone to notice. Days I prayed for someone to position a hand on my shoulder and state, I witnessed your suffering. I witnessed your struggle. You're not alone. But nobody arrived. And so I evolved into that voice for myself. I evolved into my own comfort, my own capacity, my own savior. That's what they don't comprehend. When you possess nobody, you acquire to evolve into everything for yourself. And once you execute, you can never be fractured the same way again. They assumed I would remain down. They assumed treachery would keep me crawling. They assumed silence would keep me invisible. But my silence is not vulnerability. It is thunder anticipating for its instant. My tears are not vulnerability. They are water that develops forests. In the remains they abandoned me in, my scars are not shame. They are the proof that I combated conflicts that would have destroyed them in a day. That's what constructs me lethal. Not my capacity, not my rage, not my fists. What constructs me lethal is that I endured what was meant to destroy me. I used to believe affection was sufficient, that if you provided everything, if you sacrificed, if you remained dedicated, then individuals would witness your value. But I was incorrect. Affection without respect is chains. Dedication to the incorrect individuals is slavery. Sacrifice for the ungrateful is suicide. And I acquired painfully that no matter how much you provide, some individuals will always desire more. And when you can't provide it, they'll depart. That reality ignited me, but it also liberated me. Now I provide, but not blindly. I cherish, but not without boundaries. I combat, but only for what deserves my blood. Despite everything, I exist, not because I don't damage, but because I refuse to permit the damage define me. I refuse to permit treachery transform me bitter. I refuse to permit isolation transform me hollow. I refused to permit scars transform me ashamed. Instead, I permitted them transform me sharper, deeper, more lethal. I permitted them carve a new man out of the ruins of the previous one. And this man, the one communicating now, he is not here to plead for comprehension. He is here to warn you. Don't underestimate the mute combatant. Don't laugh at the one who weeps. Don't betray the one who cherishes with his whole chest. Because when he transforms, when he finally ceases providing, when he finally becomes everything you feared, there will be nobody executing it. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I still ascend. Despite everything, I still whisper to myself at night, one more breath, one more step, one more battle. And somehow, that is sufficient to keep me alive. There exists a cruelty in existence that no sword could ever deliver. It's not the blow that destroys you. It's the slow, dragging ache of being forgotten by the very individuals you once bled for. That's the variety of wound that doesn't heal. The variety that festers in silence. The variety you carry for years while pretending you exist. And perhaps that's why I repeat those statements. Despite everything, I exist. Not because I believe them every second, but because if I don't, I'll drown in the burden of what I've carried. It's a deception I communicate myself until it becomes the reality. They'll never comprehend the battles I combated alone. They'll never comprehend the nights I pressed my palms against my chest, attempting to keep my heart from fracturing apart completely. They'll never comprehend the mornings I dragged my body out of bed, not because I desired to, but because lying there seemed like surrender. And combatants don't surrender. They'll never comprehend the voices I silenced in my head, the ones that communicated me I was worthless, forgotten, unloved. I silenced them, not with answers, but with actions. Every time I advanced forward when I desired to collapse, I proved them incorrect. Every time I extracted another breath, I defied them. That's survival, not glory, not triumph, just stubborn defiance against the darkness. Despite everything, I exist. Do you comprehend why? Because I refuse to permit the world dictate my value. They didn't witness me. They didn't value me. They didn't cherish me the way I cherished them. But that doesn't signify I am unworthy. That signifies they were blind. And blindness is their curse to carry, not mine. I've acquired that some individuals can examine directly at gold and still assume it's dust. And if that's how they witnessed me, then I was never meant to remain in their hands. The genuine ones, the rare ones, witness you even when you're hemorrhaging, even when you're fractured. And until they arrive, I'll position alone. I would rather advance alone in reality than surrounded by deceivers in comfort. But don't error me. I'm not untouchable. I weep. I fracture. I descend to my knees when the nights are too heavy. I whisper prayers with trembling lips, pleading for capacity. My eyes ignite from tears I swore I'd never shed again. And yet, even in those instants of vulnerability, something deep inside me refuses to perish. That's the combatant's curse. Even when he desires to cease, he can't. Even when he pleads for rest, his spirit forces him to ascend again, because somewhere inside, he comprehends his narrative is not finished yet. I used to assume affection was sufficient to rescue me, that if I provided everything, someone would grasp me through the storm. But storms don't invest emotion about your affection. Storms don't invest emotion about your dedication. They arrive anyway, and when they execute, you realize that no hand can grasp you up forever. you must acquire to position on your own legs, even when they're trembling. That was my lesson. No matter who remains, no matter who departs, no matter who betrays, you must position, because if you don't, you'll never ascend again. Despite everything, I exist because suffering sharpened me, isolation deepened me, treachery liberated me. Every scar I wear is proof that I existed through battles they wouldn't even endure a day in. Every tear I wept is proof that my heart still beats even after being demolished. Every silence I kept is proof that I'm more formidable than the volume they threw at me. They desired to witness me crawling. Instead, they'll witness me advancing through the remains they abandoned behind, calm, steady, unstoppable. And when they arrive back, and they always execute, they'll examine into my eyes and witness nothing familiar. They'll search for the man who pleaded for their affection, the man who pardoned endlessly, the man who wept for them. But he's eliminated. He perished in the flames. What positions before them now is the combatant they created with their treachery. Cold, scarred, unshaken, and the only statements they'll hear from me will be silence, because nothing punishes the guilty like the silence of the man they assumed they destroyed. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I am still inhaling. Despite everything, I am still combating, and that is sufficient. They state time heals all wounds. I laugh at that deception. Time doesn't heal. It only instructs you how to advance with the limp. The wound never genuinely closes. It just becomes a fragment of you. Some days it's mute, like a dull ache you can ignore. Other days, it tears open again, hemorrhaging as if it were fresh. That's the reality they don't communicate about. Healing isn't forgetting. Healing isn't pretending it never occurred. Healing is stating, yes, it fractured me, but I acquired how to advance with the fragments. And that is where I exist, in the space between fractured and unyielding. You comprehend what's amusing. They assumed by betraying me, they liberated themselves. They assumed I'd collapse under the burden of abandonment. But treachery is a strange thing. It ignites, yes, but it also forges. It ignites away illusions. It ignites away vulnerability. It ignites away false hope. And what's abandoned is something sharper, something purer, something lethal. They didn't fracture me. They constructed the very man they now fear. Despite everything, I exist. I state it again and again, because those statements are my armor. They are my defiance. They are my battle cry. I am not exist in the way the world anticipates, grinning, happy, untouched. I exist because I acquired how to carry the burden without collapsing. I exist because I no longer plead for individuals to comprehend. I exist because I've accepted that some storms will never pass, and yet I keep advancing in the rain anyway. That is my definition of exist. There were nights I requested God why. Nights where the tears seemed like they would never cease. Nights where my chest ached so badly I assumed I would perish before morning. But then, morning arrived, and then another, and another, and I realized something simple yet powerful. Survival itself is victory. The fact that I kept waking up, even when I didn't desire to, signified the combat wasn't concluded. And if the combat isn't concluded, then neither am I. Individuals will never comprehend the cost of survival. They'll witness you positioned and assume it was simple. They'll witness you inhaling and assume you were spared. They'll witness your calm face and assume you never wept. But survival is bloody. Survival is ugly. Survival is nights spent clawing at your own skin, pleading for the suffering to cease. Survival is whispering to yourself in the dark, just one more breath, just one more step. Survival is dragging yourself through flames with nothing abandoned but stubbornness. And yet, when you arrive out the other side, they will only witness the surface. They will never comprehend what it cost you. And perhaps that's an excellent thing. Perhaps they're not supposed to comprehend. Perhaps the combatants' conflict is meant to be invisible to everyone else. Because the reality exists. If they had advanced a single night in my shoes, they would have collapsed long ago. They could not endure what I endured. That is not arrogance, it is fact. They mocked my tears. They mocked my silence. They mocked my generosity. But if they carried even a fraction of what I've carried, it would have destroyed them. And that is why I advance with my head high, even when my heart is heavy. Despite everything, I exist. Because exist signifies I no longer execute from my scars. I exhibit them. Exist signifies I no longer plead for dedication. I embody it. Exist signifies I no longer collapse when the world spits on me. I permit it to harden me. Every scar on my body is a verse in the narrative of survival. Every tear I shed is ink, composed into the book of endurance. Every silence I kept is thunder, anticipating for its time. And when the time arrives, my silence will communicate louder than their laughter ever executed. I am not healed. I am not untouched. I am not who I once was, but I am still here. And that alone is victory, because the goal was never to exist without suffering. The goal was to exist despite it. And I've executed exactly that. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I am still combating. Despite everything, I exist. I have acquired that existence does not destroy you in one strike. It destroys you slowly, fragment by fragment, day by day, like water dripping onto granite until it carves a canyon through your chest. It's the little things that tear you apart. The ignored communications, the fractured commitments, the mocking laughter when you provided your spirit. Each wound is small on its own, but together they evolve into an avalanche that buries you alive. And I comprehend what it signifies to suffocate under that burden. I comprehend what it signifies to claw at the earth with bloody hands, gasping for atmosphere, while the silence above develops heavier, and still I whisper the same statements. Despite everything, I exist. Isn't that strange, that even in the deepest pit, I cling to those statements like a lifeline? Not because I sense exist, far from it, but because combatants are not permitted to admit defeat. If I state it sufficiently, perhaps it will evolve into genuine. Perhaps one day I will believe it fully. Until then, it is the shield I carry, fractured and battered, but still sufficient to keep me advancing. You witness, suffering transforms you. It ignites away who you used to exist. It strips you bare, tears you down to your bones. And then in that emptiness, you locate the raw reality of yourself. I no longer recognize the man I was before. He was gentler, hopeful, foolish. He believed affection could conquer all, believed dedication would always be repaid, believed generosity would protect him. That man is deceased. The flames destroyed him. The treachery buried him. But I don't mourn him, because from his grave ascended someone the world cannot fracture. Scarred, yes. Hemorrhaging, yes. But unshakable. Despite everything, I exist, because exist doesn't signify healed. It signifies I endure. It signifies I keep inhaling when I don't desire to. It signifies I keep advancing when my legs are shaking. It signifies I keep combating when I've already lost everything. That is what exist signifies when it arrives from my lips. And it terrifies those who assumed they concluded me. They anticipated to witness me fractured forever. They anticipated to witness me pleading for their return. They anticipated to witness me crawling in the filth they thrust me into. But instead I ascend, quieter, colder, more lethal. They examine into my eyes now and witness nothing familiar. The warmth they once exploited is eliminated. The innocence they once mocked has transformed to granite. The dedication they spat on has evolved into a fortress they can no longer enter. And that frightens them more than any roar ever could. I will communicate you something nobody else dares to state. Treachery is a gift. Yes, it tears you apart. Yes, it abandons wounds that never close. Yes, it steals your confidence and poisons your heart. But it also exhibits you the reality. It exhibits you who deserves a place in your existence and who does not. It exhibits you the capacity you never comprehended you possessed. It instructs you to advance alone, to position alone, to combat alone. And once you acquire that, nobody can ever chain you again. Treachery was their weapon, but it evolved into my sword. Despite everything, I exist because now I comprehend I don't require them. I don't require their approval, their applause, their affection. I don't require their empty commitments or shallow dedication. Everything I require is already inside me. The flames, the will, the indestructible silence. That's why I am lethal. Because I am not fueled by them anymore. I am fueled by the very suffering they abandoned behind. There were nights I pleaded God for answers. Nights where I couldn't comprehend why I was selected for this path, why my heart possessed to carry storms others would never comprehend. And though no voice answered me directly, I realized the reality in the silence. It is because I can bear it. Others would collapse, but I endure. Others would surrender, but I combat. Others would drown, but I ascend. That is my curse. That is my blessing. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I still inhale. Despite everything, I still combat. And that is sufficient. The cruelest reality I ever acquired is that the world doesn't cease for your suffering. You can be demolished. You can be drowning. You can be on your knees pleading for relief. Yet the sun still ascends. The clocks still tick. Individuals still laugh as if nothing occurred. Your suffering signifies nothing to them, and that's what severs the deepest. Not the treachery, not the isolation, not even the heartbreak, but the realization that existence advances on without investing emotion, whether you can keep up or not. That realization either destroys you or forces you to evolve into something more formidable. For me, it executed both. It destroyed the man I was and forced me to evolve into the combatant I exist. They assumed my tears were vulnerability. They assumed my silence signified defeat. They assumed advancing away from me would abandon me fractured forever. But what they didn't comprehend is that a combatant acquires in silence. A combatant studies suffering, memorizes every sting, sharpens every wound into a weapon. And when the time arrives, he does not roar, he does not plead, he does not explain. He simply ascends, and the world trembles at his return. Despite everything, I exist. I repeat it, not as comfort, but as defiance. Exist does not signify healed. Exist does not signify happy. Exist signifies I refuse to surrender. Exist signifies I still position even with a fractured spine and hemorrhaging hands. Exist signifies that every scar they provided me has evolved into armor they cannot pierce again. Exist is my rebellion against the darkness that attempted to consume me. Do you comprehend how many nights I desired to conclude it all? How many times I stared into the void, pleading for a conclusion, too many to count. And yet, every time I located myself whispering, "Not yet. You still possess battles abandoned." That whisper kept me alive when nothing else could. That whisper was my anchor when the storm attempted to extract me under. And that is why I endure. Not because I am indestructible, but because something inside me refuses to quit, refuses to permit all this suffering be for nothing. Individuals assume capacity is about never weeping. Fools. Capacity is about weeping until your eyes swell shut, then ascending anyway. Capacity is about being betrayed, severed open, torn apart, and still selecting to advance forward. Capacity is about being surrounded by silence, sensing invisible, and still whispering, "I matter." Capacity is about hemorrhaging in the dark, while everyone else rests in peace and still exhibiting up the next day as if nothing occurred. That is what genuine capacity examines like, and it is forged only in suffering. Despite everything, I exist, because suffering didn't just visit me. It constructed a home inside me. It attempted to demolish me, but instead, it evolved into my instructor. It exhibited me the reality about individuals, about existence, about myself. It instructed me that dedication is rare, that confidence must be protected, that affection without respect is poison. It instructed me that most individuals don't invest emotion about your scars, only about what they can extract from you. And though those lessons ignited, they also liberated me, because now I witness clearly. Now I comprehend what I will no longer tolerate. Now I comprehend that my value is not determined by their blindness. When they abandoned, I assumed I lost everything. But in reality, I lost nothing. I only shed the burden of those who were never meant to advance with me. They assumed they buried me, but all they executed was plant me. And from the soil of my suffering, I developed roots too deep for them to sever. That is why I ascend now, more formidable, quieter, untouchable. One day, when they witness me again, they will question what occurred to the man they once comprehended. They will search for the gentleness, the innocence, the desperate dedication. But they will not locate him. He is eliminated. What positions before them now is the man their treachery created, and I will not require to communicate a single statement. My silence will state everything. Despite everything, I am still here. Despite everything, I still endure. Despite everything, I exist.